who is the real winner of the Reze arc? Makima clearly seems to be the winner, but she actually lost at her own game of controlling Denji. And the reason Reze won is because she has something that Makima not only lacks, but desperately needs. That's why in this video, I'm gonna analyze Makima's subtle approach to controlling Denji, discuss how Reze uses that against her, and explain what it is that everyone gets wrong about the Reze arc. Just be warned that there will be major spoilers. Now, I already know what you're thinking. Makima kills Reze, so there's no discussion. The winner is the one left standing. And that would be true if Reze was trying to kill Makima, but that was never her goal. Her real mission was to control Denji, and considering Denji would have run away if it weren't for Makima getting in the way, it's pretty obvious that Makima lost at her own game. In other words, Makima used all of her tricks that she uses to control people, something that no other character can beat her at, and she still lost to Reze. And the reason she lost to Reze is even more shocking. It's because Reze stopped trying to control Denji. Now, I'm sure that sounds confusing because I said Reze out-controlled Makima and she didn't control Denji, so how does that work? Well, to understand how this happened, first we have to realize Makima's biggest flaw that none of the other characters can figure out. Ironically, that flaw is also Makima's biggest strength: manipulation. Makima is different from your typical villains because she doesn't dominate people with brute power. If you've read the work of Machiavelli, or if you've watched the movie A Bronx Tale, then you've heard about ruling through fear versus ruling through love.
The people in this neighborhood that see me every day, that are on my side, they feel safe because they know I'm close. And that gives them more reason to love me. But the people that want to do otherwise, they think twice because they know I'm close. That gives them more reason to fear me.
Characters like Aizen rule through power, dominating characters into submission with their superior strength and intellect. Makima is the kind of villain that rules through love, but not innocent love like you have for your friends or family, but by appealing to their deepest desires and using those desires against them. She does this when she first meets Denji by taking him to eat, which doesn't sound that genius, but it's also Denji we're talking about. The guy lived in a shed his whole life, so he's pretty low maintenance. But that's what she plays to. Denji wants to be fed, so she tells Denji to order whatever he wants. Also, this theme of whatever Denji wants is something that's going to come up again, so just keep this in mind. Now, as soon as Makima feeds Denji, she turns on him. She feeds him, and then she tells him to say woof. Sort of the carrot and stick approach. She does this again after Denji has a moment with power, and he admits that it was meaningless. In response, Makima grabs Denji, tells him what to do, and gives him the same thing. The difference between these two scenes is that with power, Denji got what he wanted, but there was no tension. With Makima, Denji is actually happy because Makima controls Denji's every move, making it a completely different power dynamic. This then places Makima in the perfect position to order Denji to kill the gun devil, which he says yes to since he's in the palm of her hand. Fast forward to the Reze movie and we see Makima do this yet again to the exact beats. After their movie marathon, Denji admits to Makima that he feels like he doesn't have a heart. In response, Makima presses her head against Denji's chest and tells him that he does have a heart. As a result, Denji gets the answer he wants to hear and is made to obsess over Makima. Like we see time and time again, Makima waits until Denji is vulnerable, a moment where he expresses a deep desire or weakness. She then physically takes control of that weakness in the form of immediate pleasure. In turn, she's able to control Denji by making him depend on her for his deepest desires. The strength in this approach is that it gives Makima control over Denji without Denji really knowing. She takes control of Denji's desires, and in turn, this makes Denji deeply dependent on Makima without her using any real force. But this is also Makima's biggest flaw. Makima is the ultimate manipulator, but this also means she's incapable of true intimacy. This is a much bigger theme later on, so I won't spoil it for anime onlys, but Makima's constant manipulation is almost vampiric. She gains power by feeding off of others, but the downside is that she constantly needs to feed. She can only manipulate people, and so she's incapable of relating to people on a truly equal level. And some of you might be thinking, too bad, so sad, she still rules the world, but this weakness ends up being her downfall, which is where Reze comes in. Reze uses an approach that seems identical identical to Makima's, but it couldn't be more different. We mentioned Machiavelli before, and one of his biggest fans is Robert Greene, the author of the 48 Laws of Powers, but more importantly, The Art of Seduction. According to Greene, there are different types of seducers. Makima fits more in line with what Greene calls the croquette, someone who seduces by playing this constant game of teasing and denying. And that's what Reze seems to be doing when she meets Denji. She flirts with him and bullies him. But notice how when Makima touches Denji, it's always dominant, moving his hand, placing her head on his chest and telling him what to do. Reze is different. She sits next to him but doesn't overstep boundaries. She touches his shoulder but only for a moment. So Reze is definitely flirting, but it's not the kind of dominating we see from Makima. And that's because she isn't a croquette. Reze is probably what Greene would call an ideal lover. Instead of appealing to Denji's desires, she appeals to his dreams, the dreams he forgot about. And she doesn't do this right away. She does this slowly over many interactions. First, she tests the water by bringing up studying, to which Denji seems interested. Then she takes Denji to a school and literally acts out a day in school where he clearly has fun. At this point, she starts saying stuff like, you know, normal kids go to school and learn, but you never got that. It's not right that public safety is doing this to you. Instead of appealing to Denji's base impulses like bread and sex, Reze appeals to his identity, or at least the kind of person Denji would like to see himself as. Basically, she's using the same approach as Makima by appealing to Denji's fantasies to get what she wants. But this is why she actually fails at first, because Reze fundamentally misunderstands Denji. So like we said, Reze approaches Denji as an equal rather than a figure of power. Unlike Makima, who approaches Denji at his weakest, Reze approaches him after his date with Makima, a moment where he feels like he's peaked. She then builds romantic tension through playful flirting and appeals to his ideals. She wants to make Denji think they're on equal terms, which is perfectly reflected in the pool scene, when they're alone, just the two of them, completely naked with nothing to hide. That is the nature of Reze's approach, which builds up to her big question where she asks Denji to run away with her to live a normal life. But as we know, Denji says no because he's still dependent on Makima. Of course, this is where Reze falls back to plan B, says boom, cue big budget fight scenes. But why did Reze fail? Why couldn't she get Denji to say yes, even though she had the perfect solution? Actually, she didn't. She had the perfect seduction, but for the wrong person. And this is foreshadowed in the discussion about the town mouse and the country mouse. After Denji and Reze go swimming, Reze asks Denji if he'd rather be the town mouse or the country mouse. The country mouse gets simple food but enjoys safety, while the town mouse gets the best food he can find but lives in constant danger. Reze says she wants the simple life of the country mouse, which is what her seduction is all about. She's trying to get Denji to step away from public safety and live a simple life away from everything. But Denji admits that he'd rather be the town mouse, because he loves having fun and eating good food. This is obvious to us because we've seen Denji chase food, games, and sex for the whole story, but Reze doesn't fully understand this. As a result, her perfect seduction is wrong for Denji because she set up the perfect trap for the wrong prey. This is why she fails to manipulate Denji into running away, and why she loses to Makima at first. But this is also why she ends up beating Makima at her own game. Reze tries to seduce Denji and it works, but he's still dependent on Makima, so Reze is unable to fully manipulate him. So then she fights him, and then they end up on the beach where she almost drowns, but gets saved by Denji. Notice how they're by a body of water again, like the pool, right when we get this next moment of vulnerability. Denji admits that he wouldn't be okay letting Reze die, and Reze explains that everything she did was a lie to manipulate Denji, and since she failed to complete her mission, now she's giving up and running away. And notice the timing here. The second Reze says she's not interested anymore, suddenly Denji says he wants to run away with her. Denji tells Reze to meet him at the cafe later that day. The moment Reze becomes uninterested and even hurts Denji, suddenly he's willing to abandon Makima. This is the moment that Reze finally defeats Makima at her own game. The irony is that it would be a lot easier to say this was all according to Reze's plan and that she only pretended to give up, but we know it's not that simple. We see that Reze actually packs up and nearly gets on the train to run away, but she genuinely decides to give Denji a chance at the very last second. So when she said she gave up, it wasn't an act. Reze honestly didn't want to control Denji anymore. And yet, this has the inverse effect of controlling Denji. And the reason is so simple, it sounds stupid. It's like when you like that one person and you talk to them for months, but nothing works, so you give up. And just when you give up, they suddenly start texting you more and laughing at your jokes. It's the same thing with Denji. Denji didn't feel happy with power because he had all the power. Denji felt happier with Reze because he was on equal terms, but he wasn't all in because it was safe. It was like the country mouse, which Reze admits she would prefer. Denji is only truly happy with Makima because she does two things. She appeals to his immediate desires, and she absolutely controls him. Ironically, Denji only feels safe when he is completely dominated by someone else. Like the town mouse, he's happier living a life of danger surrounded by women that are no good for him. It's just what makes him happy. And what happened in Reze's case is the moment she stopped showing interest, the power dynamic changed. Without even meaning to, Reze went from the ideal lover to the croquette, taking away her interest and thus taking the power away from Denji. This small change was all Denji needed to be happy and finally abandon Makima. But let's just be clear, this doesn't mean Reze is the same as Makima. In fact, it's because Reze is different that she's able to take advantage of Makima's biggest flaw, which is her need to dominate. Reze initially loses because she's trying to be the same as Makima. She's playing as an equal rather than a manipulator, but she's still using Denji's fantasies to meet her own ends. But she sets the foundation by building that equal relationship. So when she finally gives up and loses interest, Denji finally feels like Reze has the power advantage in their relationship and he has to win her over. The difference is that while Makima makes Denji happy, she doesn't fulfill his hidden desire for intimacy. Reze has this power over Denji and she makes him feel like an equal, a true friend and lover. So the reason she's ultimately able to beat Makima is because she's actually able to open up to Denji. Makima's biggest flaw is that she has to dominate everyone, meaning she can never connect with anyone else as a true equal. Because of this, Reze is able to build an intimate relationship with Denji that Makima can never have. This is why it's so easy to overlook the ending of the Reze arc, because when Makima reveals she's been hiding the whole time and she kills Reze, it looks like she's the winner. But Reze was able to make Denji do what she wanted even after she completely lost interest. It's the ultimate lesson in ruling through love and fear, and it's why Reze is the only character who ever beat Makima at her own game.